In Time of Plague is a series of paintings that explores many aspects of the pandemic through the artist's eye. These large abstract paintings pull together her daily walks, photographs and sketchbook studies into a series of work that catches the eye with vivid colour and action-filled brush marks.
All painting, or at least all that I do, is a kind of balancing act between form and content. I start with an idea, a feeling, and a rather indistinct image. But as soon as I start to put it on canvas, the work establishes its own imperatives. It has to work as a two-dimensional assemblage of line, shape, and color, of light and dark. It never ends up where I thought it would, or where I even thought it was going. If it did, would I just stop painting? I don't know. You have to go where it takes you. Likewise, drawing for me is never a precise study for a painting. It's more like Paul Klee's statement about his little line taking a walk. I just want to let it wander. The oil pastels and colored pencils are a kind of halfway house. Introducing color moves things forward, but oil paint is a whole different world. So every painting is a history of several other paintings. I would still like to do even more with this. But once the pandemic was established, one couldn't avoid it. One really had to take it into the work, and really it just took over. But it's complicated because the other parts of life don't disappear. For years I've been concerned with death and aging as opposed to flesh and sensuality and desire. And the pandemic doesn't make those concerns disappear. In fact, it's made them more poignant. In the shadow of plague, do we succumb or oppose? How do we embody life and light and the shadow?
Her work enamors friends and acquaintances as bias plays its typical role. They are, to no surprise, vocal of their fondness, but such admiration comes from an understanding of every meticulous detail that Steinberg places into her work. The time, research, exploration, experimentation, and knowledge of art. This way of absorbing life reveals itself into something 2D and still strangely alive.
I first met Barbara, dates late 60s, like 1969, 1970. I met her in the sculpture studio, and we started a conversation. And that's how I first got to know her. So I knew her as a sculptor, and then my husband was the professor of sculpture there, Stephen Werlick. And they always maintained contacts. You can get very academic and talk about the contrast between, for instance, in this latest series, the black lines versus the colors. But I feel the colors, and I've always felt that way about her work, that the colors are very dimensional. You feel like you can walk into them. Very easy is with the oil medium is you can create a large color field, but it can become very flat and almost dull no matter how bright it is. And with hers, they're so luminous. And they just feel like you walk into that and you're bathed in this beautiful color. And maybe there's more behind that and more behind that because they're so layered. And she also worked in pastels for quite a while. And again, I see a real connection between the pastels and between the oils, they have the same luminosity. The friend is on a social level. Her art, I mean, is very intense. She is so dedicated and so disciplined. And I think just, the way she comes about the process of coming up with these wonderful images, it's I'm sure there's a lot going on there that I'm assuming there's a lot going on there. And it was always fun to walk down to her studio, and she could work there during certain times of the year, but then when she couldn't, she was drawing and always productive and always searching. And how Barbara just concentrates the essence of these branches into these dynamic lines that just do so much for the image. How something so deceptively simple is really so much deeper.
We moved into this street 38 years ago, and Barbara had 2 young children, and we were their next door neighbours, and immediately forged quite a good relationship. And Barbara has sort of been a mentor and friend ever since, really. She's a very creative lady. She's an artist, clearly, and I know she's completely uninterested in anything else that she's done other than what she's doing at the moment. And she never really looks at anything from a commercial angle. She always had this amazing workshop at the end of her garden, which is a little construction, which is her world. And then every day she walks early in the morning, and then she goes down to this workshop, which, as I said, is incredibly inspiring, and paints what she feels, I suppose, what she's felt that day. I mean, when you look at her body of work, particularly the work she's doing at the moment, the In Time of Play, you can see through the season from the beginning, which I think she started back in January, to date, plotting her influences really, and what she feels is relevant and interesting.
I've always thought of my paintings as landscapes, not literal landscapes, but metaphorical ones. And within that world, seasons and times of day and light and dark, cold and hot affect the work. They're reflected in color and mood and intertwined with the emotional content. One can't separate the different strands. And it doesn't, of course, always work.
There's always light and hope in Barbara's paintings. However, always a little bit of darkness in the background. You always feel that there might be just something sort of lurking in the background that perhaps is possibly looming or possibly to be kept at bay, really. I mean, Barbara's incredibly knowledgeable about painters and about the art world, and I mean, she's studied that for 50 years. There's nothing that she doesn't know, or painters that she doesn't know of, and don't share that knowledge. People like Rubens and Titian that she absolutely adores, and you can see elements of that influence coming through in what she's doing.
The virus is the great shadow over all our experience now. The struggle is to find beauty and possibility in the experience, and beauty despite it, and the promise of beauty in the future. But beauty, of course, is actually never enough. All art probably aspires to Robert Frost's definition of poetry, that it begins in delight but ends in wisdom. I would like to go there. We all try to.
We have no choice but to respond to our current situation. But seasons move as they always have. There is sun and rain, and life returns to the landscape. These are Steinberg's words, and this is the series of paintings she made in response to the pandemic.